covering everything. I'm talking that news you ain't heard of, cause you know it's getting buried. Social justice, yeah, the stuff you need to know about. Fucking politics that the corporate news won't cover. You know they don't think that you could see under, but you can now, cause the people we cover, they may not be famous, but their story should be heard. Yeah, every voice matters, we should rise and fall together, and that's why he represents.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, the end of your, I don't know, maybe it's the end of your work week, but it's the end of the traditional work week. I am so tired this morning, so forgive the low energy, but we do have a lot to talk about this morning. Most of this program is going to be focused on white people yet again, because we're still not getting the message here about how to be a good ally, and some of you are actually going in the opposite direction. So we're seeing this social media, we're seeing this with corporate media all over the place, and even people who are well-meaning are still not getting the message. So let's do this yet again. Get your coffee, settle in, join the conversation if you'd like to. We do see your messages as they come up, and we'll respond to them in kind if we can. So yeah, so that's what's on the agenda today. Good morning, Andy. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm tired. I'm tired. So
yes, I got that.
Yeah,
I got that. I just wanted to say that for the first time in a long time, I passed the test. Very, very, very happy about that. I didn't even study.
This was your COVID test.
This was my COVID test, and a test in which negative is a good thing.
Excellent. Well, congratulations. Negative test is a good thing. So, yay.
Yes,
you're fine.
That's right. And, unlike like a CAT scan where it comes up negative too. Somebody had to explain to me that a negative CAT scan means there's nothing wrong with you. It doesn't mean that they can't find a cat.
Right. There's no cat in a CAT scan. So, I thought there would be cats to pet.
They told me they'd be cats.
Oh, Taylor says that I have shitty lighting. Thanks, Taylor. Well, Taylor,
Love your hair.
Taylor, I appreciate the feedback. I can tell you it's not happening today. Yeah, sorry. So maybe just turn off the video and just listen along. But thank you, Taylor.
Yes, can we get you to turn the contrast down on your screen?
Right. So it's like that passive aggressive thing that women do to each other. You look tired.
Right. Are you still in the first trimester, or are you in the second?
Exactly. Okay, so I have another light. Taylor, is that better? Are you good? You good, buddy? Let me say this. I'm being passive aggressive and demeaning, but I do appreciate the critique. I'll just say I've been up for 2.5 hours dealing with bullshit this morning. Let me say this. People on the left don't know how to win, and they do everything in their power to keep from winning. And it cut into my sleep this morning. So y'all stop it. Just stop it. You're not.
It's almost like it's a learned experience from the Democratic Party, right? That spends most of their time trying not to win because they really don't care about being in power. They just don't want to lose any of the current advantage that the political and economic environment affords them.
That may be. It's almost like we need to have the psychologist back on. Taylor's still going on about Taylor, let go of the lighting. For fuck's sake, really, let it go. But
Yeah.
getting back to your point, it's almost like an abusive relationship, and I want to have Sarah back on to talk about. Kind of, you're right. We spent so much time in the Democratic Party that we learned some really bad behaviors and don't know how to win, don't know what winning looks like, don't know what it takes to win, and constantly self-sabotage. It's amazing to me. So,
Well, look at the opposition, right? How is it even possible in a normal world that the GOP would even exist?
well, that's
It's
it.
kind of like the Yankees, playing their AA affiliate all year, right? There's some degree of certainty that the Yankees are going to win the World Series if those are the only two teams in the league.
True. Well, now we're going to get into this whole access to voting and gerrymandering. And so if all things were equal and we were actually doing things in a logical way, like using the computer modeling data to make sure that our districts were proportionate and equal across congressional levels and county levels, Republicans would never win another election, ever.
You would think that would be the case, right? Logical thought would take you to that conclusion every single time.
Okay. Taylor! Damn it.
All right.
No,
Stop
no.
looking at the comment.
No, he's actually being snarky, which I appreciate. Gold star for you, Taylor. Taylor says, talking about something that's like an abusive relationship, that lighting, he just basically went, girl. He didn't go on the frizzy undone hair this morning, so thank you, Taylor. But he promises he's done now. Thank you. So, all right.
What was that? The show that was put on? Was it on the Fox network that was opposite Saturday Night Live? Was the introduction to Jim Carrey and Jamie Foxx and those guys? What was that?
In Living Color.
In Living Color.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That Taylor that was around the world in backslack.
That's what it was. Or the Z. Yeah. Go ahead, girl. So, well, thank you for that, Taylor. We appreciate your feedback. But let's get into bullshit things that white people do. Because it's a long list.
How long is the show?
Right. It's a long list. So let's start off with our favorite troll, Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer.
Nice that an entire country didn't want him.
Oh man. Yeah, so Canada, you guys threw him out, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, you guys had a choice between him and Justin Bieber.
Oh, what?
I know. How you feeling about that now?
Not good. Who decided that? Who negotiated on our behalf? Because I feel like it must have been like 13-year-old girls.
I think the email got lost in your junk folder.
Oh, shit. Okay. All right. I'm going to put up this tweet from Ted Cruz.
Oh.
Okay. So, Ted.
I may avert my eyes.
Yeah. So, Ted, his favorite, he literally has a hard on for Ilhan Omar. And anytime she sneezes, he's right there for it. So she was talking about Columbus and the genocide. And Ted Cruz, of course, had to pipe up. And he says, no, he didn't commit genocide literally or otherwise. He discovered the New World, which led to colonizers, some of whom inadvertently brought disease. Is it your position that it's inherently immoral to come to America from a foreign land? I'm glad my dad came from Cuba. First of all,
him and Justin Trudeau.
Right. So, okay, this is what we call whitewashing of history. This is a
Oh,
perfect
God.
example. And there are so many points in here that he has factually wrong. Not just opinion, but empirical facts. Empirical means it is done. It's decided gravity works. Gravity is a thing. It is empirical. So there's the genocide. That he discovered a new world. No, he fucking didn't. First off, Leif Erikson did. And when we say discovered, meaning the people on one side of the planet weren't really sure, but now we have geological evidence that, yeah, they've been trading back and forth for a long fucking time.
Oh my God! How this is something that I would expect to see posted on Twitter by Nate's Liver.
A parody.
Or Ron Placone or
Right,
Graham Elwood or whatever his name is.
Mm.
This is comic gold. This is gold, Jerry. This is gold. I loved it. This is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And so
the part that they don't show that he had to remove was the part where he exclaims that Columbus was responsible for bringing the unicorns to America.
That's exactly right. Ted, get on that. Get on. He's pulling from the same history books that show the dinosaurs walking around with people. So we'll forgive him that. He apparently doesn't know how to use Google, but I'm sure that it's free where he lives. So, we got, hey, Azalea, good morning. Azalea gets up early with us, like every day. Good morning, Azalea. And she's chiming in. She said, I'm starting to wonder if whites are in denial of what's actually been done or scared of change. Good point. Good point.
Actually, I'm wondering if Ted Cruz was talking about Columbus, Ohio.
Which is even worse. I mean, okay, so I used to live in Ohio, and most people are not aware. The Ku Klux Klan national headquarters is in this cute little storefront downtown Dayton, Ohio on 1st Street. And I didn't believe it, so I had to go see it for myself. And they have like the old-fashioned name on the door, right? In the, it's the clear glass with the little writing, national headquarters. It's right fucking there. So,
it's a front for a linen store.
Right. Or like a barber shop. It's just right there, and it's a block from the police station, downtown police station. And so all the bullshit that you see coming out of Ohio, like voter disenfranchisement, all of the stuff, there's a reason for it. In fact, they still burn crosses just north of Dayton in Vandalia, Ohio. In fact, I lost a job once because my ex-husband dropped me off at work, and he's a really big black guy. And I remember going into work, and somebody happened to see that he dropped me off, and they're like, who was that dropped you off? And at the time, I was still married. I was like, oh, that's my husband. Didn't think anything about it because at that time, I still didn't understand the thought process and the degradation of morality of white people at the time, because I was primarily raised overseas. So
we're in countries that aren't filled with Americans.
Yeah, exactly. So and white people. So when I was younger, I'm 5'8", and I grew up mostly overseas in Southeast Asia. So from Pakistan over, I was there. So I'm I was a good 1.5 feet taller than most people, and then bright red hair. You stand out a little bit.
Your nickname there was the Giant Ginger?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, well, no.
I mean that in a good sense.
Do you mean that?
So it's the few times on this show that I get to use alliteration, right? So.
Right. Well, honestly, I never heard the term ginger till I came back to the States. I was like, well, ginger? What? But Yeah, so when I had that experience, it got dropped off. Within a few hours, I was getting called up to the senior VP's office, and they were like, it's just not working out. And there was nothing in my performance, attendance, or anything that would have precluded me from continuing the employment. And then it just dawned on me. I was like, holy shit, I just lost a job because I got dropped off by a black man who I happen to be married to. But yeah, so that's Vandalia, Ohio. Most of Ohio is like this. You have Cincinnati shares the river with Kentucky, Newport. Um, there's a whole lot of things going on in Ohio that is just, it's not cool by modern standards. So I get it.
I have so much more respect for Father Kaboob now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's when he's in Columbus, I'm like, oh, okay. Even though the university's there, you have. It's the opposite of most places. In Ohio, you have pockets of reasonable.
Safe zones?
Yeah, safe zones, reasonable people. The rest of it is just. So yeah, that's it's unbelievable. So getting back to Ted Cruz and his misunderstanding of Columbus.
My distractions only worked for so long. Now we have to go back and watch. Okay.
Well, because I actually have a written outline in front of me. I do homework.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, one of the documents, the collection of historical works that I absolutely love, there are two books that I typically will recommend highly, and one of them is this book on history, because most history books, when people set out to write a book, they rely on the work of others that has come before them, right? So they're not going back to historical documents, they're using the work of others. So bad data in is bad data out. So if I write a history book, in this case, Ted Cruz writes a history book, and he talks about how Columbus brought unicorns to the New World. And then I try to write a history book and I use Ted Cruz as my source, then I'm going to assume that he is correct and there were unicorns at one time in the New World. And that's how all of these history books are written, except for some individuals. One of them is Howard Zinn. He goes back and does an archaeological study and finds the source documents, not relying on what came before. Now, he does have a little bit of bias, but I believe that his bias comes from reading the source documents, not relying on someone else. So, for example, when he wrote his chapter on the New World in Columbus, he used Columbus's own journal and he used other journals. So, for example, there was this really young priest that was sent with him. Of course, Columbus, being sent by the Queen, the Spanish country, the church and state were really, really close. So what you had was the Queen is insisting you take the priest, and he's watching over. So there's one portion of this diary from the priest, and I'm not going to get it verbatim, but I remember him saying, I can scarcely write this because my hands are shaking so badly. This poor priest was witness to such horrific crimes against humanity because of Columbus and his soldiers that this guy was literally losing his shit. And once he got back to Spain, he went into seclusion. So I'm going to put up here two passages, one from Columbus's own diary, and then one, it's an excerpt from this young priest. So I'll put those up here just to see if I can figure out what I'm doing here. All right, so, all right, here are these two passages. So the first one was from Columbus himself, his own captain's journal. And it's an excerpt, so this is where the dotted lines are. But it says, they brought us, he's talking about when he first met the indigenous people in the New World, in the islands. He said, they brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk's bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built, with good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms and did not know them, for I showed them a sword, and they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made of cane, and they would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. So here's the mindset of Columbus. He's a conqueror. He is not an explorer. And what they did to these people was so horrific. And sometimes just for sport. His men would just walk over and kill somebody because they could. Right? So keep that in mind with what we're seeing now in the news about police. They did this because there was no one to hold them accountable. Might makes right, and they could do it because they just could. So the second portion of
Now,
this.
before you get to the second part, I just wanted a little anecdotal part there about the first part. If you read that they handed them the sword and they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance, could also, a similar statement to that could be, I was firing my gun at a target and these people kept getting in the way.
That's exactly it. Same mentality. It comes from the same place. Like, well, it's their fault. I had nothing to do with it. It's their fault, right? So it's this mentality that we see from hundreds of years ago that directly applies to the topic today about white people. What the fuck? That we are not to be held to account or responsible for our actions or our own ignorance. So the second portion is an excerpt from this priest. And I feel so badly for him. If you pick up this book, A People's History of the United States by Howard Zinn, it's very cheap. I have the hard copy version because it's totally a go-to for me. But in it, he says, this priest, he's talking about endless testimonies, talking to the natives and what he's seen. He says, prove the mild and pacific temperament of the natives. But our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, and destroy. Small wonder then if they tried to kill one of us now and then. The admiral, it is true, was blind as those who came after him, and he was so anxious to please the king that he committed irreparable crimes against the Indians. So this entire chapter is dedicated to how the Europeans viewed natives. So you're basically coming into someone else's house, and your host then becomes the target of your murderous onslaught and greed and everything else. So that's literally our history. There are several different online resources for you. There's the History as a Weapon, which took Howard Zinn's work and put it online with these excerpts. There is the Howard Zinn Project, where teachers are given lesson plans and all of these things. Like my son's high school history class, he was sent home not with a book, but with photocopies, which concerned me. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is Howard Zinn. So I wrote his teacher a letter of appreciation and thanked him for using a credible document and not, a textbook approved by the Texas Board of Education where they can barely read. So I highly recommend, if you haven't been familiar with Howard Zinn and his work, please go see it so that we can help educate people like Ted Cruz who have control over our lives. That would be good, I would think. So that's the first one. Andy, any comments on Columbus? Should we still be celebrating Columbus Day, or maybe it becomes Indigenous Peoples Day.
Well, and that's been floating around for quite a while, and I'm all for it, right? I think that, you know, that this is all part and parcel with what we're seeing right now, and how these are all things that if we continue, you know, we may finally be able to achieve that, right?
Yeah. And this is what we're seeing now is a plea from our fellow countrymen. White people, please keep this energy up, because we view it as trendy. And yay, we're all on this team. Okay, now I'm bored with it, so I'm going to go do something else. And we see this with the streaming community, like Twitch and Steam gamers. They were all in it, and now they're right back to promoting themselves. And that self-promotion, not just from gamers, but Instagram models and influencers and things like that. They're done with this topic, and they're ready to move forward. So if you want to be an ally, there's some really handy tools to help you. So for example, Jaja, who we've had on the show now twice.
Motherfucking Nathan, Jack.
Yeah. So Jaja Kilmore, she has now split her stream. She's still a variety game streamer, but she prefaces her stream with a nice talk about why this movement is so important and how to be a good ally. And so she starts her stream off with this nice conversation, and then the second half of her stream is gaming. So she's found a nice balance, and she's trying to encourage other people to do the same. So this is one way you can do it. And I did come across a series of really handy graphics. It's a pictorial map that white people really need to absorb and understand, and do it on their own time. So first point that I want to make to white people is a random black person is not your black ambassador. You should not be quizzing them on things that you can find out on your own. This is part of where your own personal accountability comes in. Google is a thing. Try the Google machine. Start reading a series of books, and they're all out there. All these recommendations, this conversation has been had for 150 years. So you can find all of this stuff on your own. Do your own homework. Because what we're seeing is well-meaning white people are attempting to make black people their personal tutors, and you don't get to do that. Second, we're seeing a lot of the alt-right, the fascist, white supremacists using the same tactic to derail those conversations. So don't make yourself an ally to the alt-right inadvertently through your ignorance and laziness, okay?
Because one thing that you can say about the right side of the political spectrum is they might be reprehensible, but they're organized.
Oh goodness, are they, right? And so once again, shout out to K-pop. They keep following their trending hashtags and trying to derail them, which I totally appreciate. But yeah, they're super organized, and they're talking to each other about how to do this. So I'm going to bring up the first handy one. This is about how to be a good ally. So this one you can see it's labeled authentic allyship, and there's a at Sirica, whatever. I'm gonna butcher that, but this is who created it, and I think it's a brilliant representation of things that you want. So when you start to see headlines about Black Lives Matter, or people getting shot, murdered by police, or they can't vote, or they're not getting the adequate support from our tax dollars, property taxes for schools, all of these things. This should be your response. And if you're not sure, just be quiet for a minute. As white people, we are so used to whatever bullshit opinion we have matters, and we're able to say it. You need to stop. Just close your mouth, be still, and listen, right? So,
full disclosure, when you introduced this graph, I actually thought you said authentic ally shit.
Oh, because I'm still not awake. So I'm not enunciating.
Which you may not have. I may just have heard it wrong.
Yeah.
But, far
Yeah.
be it from me to miss an opportunity to, crack a funny joke or.
Yeah, you and Taylor this morning picking on me. I get it. I totally get it. So next to it, I put the example of white fragility, and this we see a lot. So rather than responding with empathy or not saying anything and just letting the conversation happen and absorbing it and understanding it's not about you, white fragility is an actual thing. So, and you'll experience it. Anybody could experience this where something happens and automatically you feel guilt or you take umbrage with this conversation or you're defensive. So this is where we see the things about, well, all lives matter, or I'm uncomfortable with things. Hold on one second. I'll be right back. Andy, go ahead and take over the conversation.
All right. So one thing I did want to speak about, and we were talking about, and I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but we were talking about blackface, right? People that are white that are putting on makeup or what have you, or doing lighting tricks to make themselves appear to be a person of color. And there are so many reasons why that is an absolute horrible thing to do. Right now, we can wait and get into that. I didn't know you were going to return so quickly, so and I know that you have a way that you want to roll this out, and I may have jumped ahead.
No,
anyways,
you were
continue.
fine. So my husband is leaving to go check on his parents in southern Indiana. So it's a long drive. So he was just saying goodbye.
You had to go give him a goodbye kiss
Yes.
and a stink eye.
And a stink eye, because I'm like,
trouble.
dude, I am in the middle of something. He's like, whatever, bye. So he don't care. There's no prestige.
Go back and play with your little internet friends.
Right. There's no prestige in anything we're doing. So okay, so with these two slides, I'm gonna take the white fragility and the good ally down, and then I'm gonna compare this to this particular one is considered, let me get this up here, again, not awake, toxic expressions of white people's bullshit. That is not what the slide's called, that's what I'm calling it. Weaponized white fragility. So we took that example of people being butthurt about somebody else's thing, right, their issue, and now they're taking it to a negative space. So it almost reminds me of like siblings. When one child has a birthday, the other one gets pissed off because they're not the center of attention. To me, this is the core of white fragility. I am so used to being the center of attention, and I am actually used to living in a culture that demeans these other people where they don't matter. So all of a sudden, if we're having a conversation that doesn't include me, I'm going to be upset about it and hurt. And then I'm going to take that negative feeling and I'm going to use it in an aggressive way. So shaming people, using your privilege, like all the Karens who are calling the police because, this person's invading my space.
The audacity to use a barbecue.
Right. Or, the little girl who was selling water. Oh my God, really? Now I'll admit, whenever I see a little kid with their lemonade stand, my first response is, I'm gonna Yelp it. I'm gonna rate them. But that's a joke compared to what these people are doing, where we absolutely know that people are dying because of the police. Therefore, we're going to use that as a cudgel and a threat. We know that. And then invalidation, where the Blue Lives Matter and anytime someone gets shot, like there is no law in the United States right now that is, there's nothing that you can do that qualifies you for an immediate death sentence. That's capital crime. Nothing. What we have here is the pretense that you will be arrested and face your charges. That is due process. So when we have someone who is killed by police who have made themselves judge, jury, and executioner illegally, the response from the weaponized white fragility is, well, what did they do? And we saw this with George Floyd. They talk about everything that he did 10 years ago last Tuesday that might have been wrong, whether he was convicted of a crime, whether he served. None of that matters. None of it matters to the present conversation. And just because, you know, in this day and age, most teenagers don't get out of their teen years without having a run-in with the police, either for underage drinking or being loud or whatever it is bullshit that teenagers do. So if we're going to say that that episode from your teenage years now applies to your behavior today, then we have a problem. So I'm thinking of the Kavanaugh thing, right? When Kavanaugh was being reviewed for Supreme Court justice, and we went back to a party where he was a teenager. I know that a lot of people on the left looked at that as a continuation of behavior. However, I did not join that because I'm not excusing what may or may not have happened when he was a teenager, but for the same argument, right? If he had done something as a teenager, in this case, he was accused of rape, I believe it was, rape or sexual assault, and there was no pattern from his 20s, his 30s, his 40s, I don't think that it is relevant to bring into an argument for someone who's almost 60 years old. What is he, 59?
Yeah, and that's, you know, typical, right? Like, I mean, the one thing that when you get to that danger zone, as I like to call it, the teens, early 20s, when you go through a time in your life where you're becoming sentient, you're still growing brain, and you come to the concept that you know everything and everybody that is older than you is an idiot, and you never think about the consequences of your own actions. And that's just lack of experience in living, right? And it's just something that some people are better at than others getting through, right? And so you can't really blame a group of an age group of human beings because of what typically would be considered human nature, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. That's exactly right. So you were talking about talking about blackface, and this is I want to bring up one example, just one example of many that we've seen over the last few weeks. So going back to the centering yourself, making this conversation all about you, we saw Instagram models and celebrities and other people engaging in the conversation in a way that is wholly inappropriate. Because when you, now I get that as an Instagram model, in order to rise to the level where you are actually earning money and an audience, a lot of your day is consumed with thinking about yourself and how to elevate your profile. And the way that you think and the patterns that you choose to engage in will dictate the decisions you make. It's that old adage about feed the wolf. That I forget where it comes from, but it's, you have inside you two wolves, the good wolf and the bad wolf, and the one that prevails is the one that you feed. That was my cat.
You have a cat burglar.
I'm like, I didn't even know she was in here. But that's the big fluffy one. So Yeah, so this is where the whole idea of, and it's true, when you engage in patterns of behavior, you're cultivating a thought process and more likely and predisposed to that line of thought. So this is where feed the right wolf comes in. So with these Instagram people, they're all about their image and themselves, and unfortunately in this situation, they took the wrong path forward. So I'm going to put up one example, and I don't know who this woman is. I'm not hip or cool, but she's a Lebanese singer, and in the image on the right is what she looks like on a regular day. On the left is what she chose to do in acknowledgement of the worldwide protests. And she took a lot of heat for it, right? So rather than celebrating a real Black woman, this woman who thought she was being, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and assume that she meant well by it. She put herself in blackface and put on an Afro wig as if to say we are all the same, but for. Yeah, but for.
Are you being invaded?
Yeah, I have. This is the same cat. This is the fluffy cat. So, yay Friday. This is truly a fucking Friday. So, so anyway, she took a lot of heat for this one because this is her, an example of her putting herself at the center of the conversation, not stepping back and having a good conversation about relevant topics. And so I hope that this illustrates what we've been talking about, where white people is not about you. It's not about how you feel or you think or anything about you other than use your privilege to advance this conversation.
Exactly. Like, I mean, the whole thing screams, instead of, elevating persons of color.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to co-opt this for myself. Right?
Yeah.
As some form of trying to be an ally. And it just fails miserably. Right? We don't have extremely tall people walking around on their knees wearing t-shirts that say short lives matter.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Come on.
Exactly. So let me give you an example of how you can use your privilege to advance the conversation. So you can patiently explain to family and friends why the All Lives Matter is a marginalized way to diminish a relevant conversation that is long overdue. You can do that. Or you can take a far more militant approach, which I see some people doing online, and kudos to you. So in these conversations where we have Black people trying to tell their story, you will have some of the ignorant and some of the malice examples of white people trying to disengage and derail a conversation. So if you feel like being a little more militant, that is where you can step up. So you're not engaged in the initial conversation. You are now centering on that person who is being harmful. So now you have your white privilege against their white privilege and go to town. So you can do that in a real world example, and you can do that online. I myself have done this many, many times, and I'm going to tell you, if you're going to do it in real life, be prepared for a physical altercation to develop. And if you're down for it, that is totally okay, because you are still taking that person out of disrupting the more important conversation and pulling them to a space where they can no longer be disruptive. And that's going to continue on over there, where you are now neutralizing this disruption in a I'm not going to say positive, because if it does get physical, then But see, these are ways that you can be a good ally and not disrupt what's really important.
Right? And this goes back to the conversation that we had on Wednesday about, you know, and I'm always been the glass half full type of guy. I always give people the benefit of the doubt. And I know that there is a shit ton of white people that mean well, right? That are trying to behave in a way that shows their support for just people in general, right? It's the thoughtlessness that we have to overcome. That, you know, that we have to critically think about, either by listening to people or by doing our own research, or even just, you know, going through the logical process of what is an acceptable way of helping and what isn't.
Mhm.
Right? And that's all part of people's enlightenment, and will ultimately change the way that the world looks at human beings, right, in a colorblind way.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a very, very important thing. And one thing I will say, and I meant to say this on Wednesday, but and forgive me, because I was going to actually give a season an episode, but there is a very well-known episode of the original series in Star Trek, and I don't know if you saw it yourself or not, and it was a story about the Enterprise going to a planet where there was systemic racism, right? And Gene Roddenberry was famous for using his platform and the Star Trek series to deal with real world problems, right, in his own way, and make people think about what was actually wrong with the world and how they might turn around and help to change that. And this episode was about two races of people on the same planet. And if you recall, if you saw it, one of the races had a black on one side of their face and white on the other.
Yes.
And the
Okay.
other race
Yeah.
had that opposite. And the whole thing was the human beings that were in the future that, you know, were assumed to have risen above that type of systemic racism, and them trying to understand why they hated one another. And the one gentleman explaining, well, the colors were on the wrong side. And people, you know, either successfully or unsuccessfully trying to make the jump as to why that was ridiculous, and how to take that issue and apply it to ourselves with our own racism.
Oh, exactly.
Right?
So I am a Star Trek geek, and the name of that episode is Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. It was the 3rd season, 15th episode. So I'm sure it's on YouTube. Go check it out. So, but Dr. Seuss did one. It was those little birdie things. Some had stars on their bellies, some didn't. I mean, so there are plenty of opportunities for people to explore this on their own and really start to get it. I guess maybe because it doesn't affect me personally, right? If I don't, well, I have one black friend, but I've never sat down and talked to them about what their experience is. And if you want to hear the story, then Major General of the Army posted a video. It is 1 minute 20 seconds long. 1 minute 20 seconds. And he came out with this story. He said, as part of the Army, we have to trust each other and tell our stories. So he told his story. And he talked about being of mixed race. His mom is white, his dad is black. They divorced when he was 3. His mom moved to Alabama, so he struggled with identity. There goes my cat again. 1 minute 20 seconds, and what's amazing to me is he's passing white. So had he not come out and said this, now this is the highest officer in the Army, who's sharing his personal story, and he just talks about one small moment of where that is, where that was a challenge for him. So how many white people with their one black friend have really sat down and had a conversation of, what does this mean to you? Have I ever said anything? Tell me about your experience. What is it like for you driving while black, and all of these sort of things. So, and I think the most important point I want to leave people with today, me personally, is you cannot stop. Not now. Whenever white people sit down, get distracted, and this conversation stops, we get another decade of people dying. We get
Yes.
another decade
And
of
no real change.
exactly.
Right? Remember what Prof. Yule said, a friend of the show,
Yes.
an all-round good person, told us that it's not until the oppressors want the change that the oppressed get change. Right? So that means that it's not until white people start to put everything on the line that we actually start to see that change.
Right. Because I can't remember if it was you or where I read it. Things are running together, but racism is not a black person's problem. This is a white person's problem. And we are the ones who fix it and decide enough.
That's right. And let's also remember that any people that are experts in this field, in sociology or psychology or what have you, explain, and we can see this in our daily lives, right? That we have young children of, all different colors playing together because they're just kids playing together. So that tells us that we are not born racists. That is a learned skill, and any skill that has learned can be unlearned.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of what we're talking about here, confronting it in yourself. So here's some additional homework for people if you're watching now or you watch this later. Trump has 2 rallies planned. And for any of our MAGA people who are still head in the sand claiming Trump is not racist, he just nullified that entire argument in these 2 actions. He's got 2 rallies planned. One of them he specifically set on the Juneteenth celebration in Tulsa. So your homework is to go and research Tulsa and Black Wall Street. So just a quick Google search, Tulsa, Black Wall Street, and why the Juneteenth date is so important. He did this on purpose.
Yes, and be prepared, because it's not a feel-good story.
No.
It'll never be turned into a musical.
No, and this is one of those things that they don't teach us in school. They act like it never happened, but it is horrific what happened in Tulsa. And yeah, so that is your first assignment, Tulsa, Black Wall Street. Second is Trump's second rally now has been moved to Jacksonville, Florida. And the date on this one is pretty significant as well. It's the 60th anniversary of the Axe Handle Saturday. This happened in Jacksonville, and it was the KKK who orchestrated a massacre on black activists in Jacksonville on August 27th. That is the same day that he and Republican organizers put this rally together for him to accept the Republican nomination. So there are no coincidences in any of this. These are outright call-outs to fascists who want to start a division and a race war. We believe and have evidence, thanks to the Boogaloo Boys and alt-right, they are quite literally trying to start I don't know if it's quite on the level of a civil war, but
Well, we could call it a race war, right? We would, the continuation, the escalation of the race war. We
yeah.
could say that.
Yeah, and I think what makes me feel a little bit better is that every one of our generals and leads of our major military branches, including Space Force, has come out against this racism and come out against Trump. So these are huge, huge developments because that doesn't happen with our military at all. They try to, when you're in that kind of leadership role, it is a source of pride and duty to remain silent and neutral because you serve the country regardless of your political ideology. What has happened is all of these people have come out now against what they see as things that are contrary to our Constitution and the protection of our people. So that makes me feel a little bit better, but still. So these are your homework assignments.
Oh, by the way, quick side note: if you go to the United States government, the US.gov, blah blah blah, whatever it is, they now have President Trump's job as current U.S. president and Bible salesman.
Yeah, there's that. So at some point we're gonna have to tackle a religious discussion because let me just say this: 32,000 different registered Christian denominations in this country. I'm pretty sure they're not all teaching Christianity. So Trump is probably going to get a nice little sales job with one of them because he hasn't read that book either.
No. Oh, you mean it as well as the Constitution?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah. So, let's see. I'm guessing, I can't see who this is. I'm guessing it's Jeffrey. Jeffrey is concerned that he missed the part of the show that explained how not to be a moron. Yeah,
that's Jeffrey.
So, and then Azalea is echoing your comments. Racism is taught, and it's not natural. And she thanks us for the ammunition she can use against Trump supporters. So, we're doing our part, as small as it is, with our tens of viewers. So,
right. And I would like to push back on one thing. And I actually have seen this a number of times in Twitter, right? The good feel-good platform. There are a number of people that are even that I've seen that are that are even putting it in their Twitter handles, right? That I will not, that I hate Biden and his supporters, right?
mm-hmm.
I would push back on that and say that Joe Biden doesn't necessarily have supporters. I would classify them as collaborators.
Good point. So, yeah, on top of everything else we're dealing with, so my choice is an American voter at the top of the ticket. Now, there's plenty of choices down ballot, and there are races still going on. In fact, we'll have the interview with Andrew Romanoff running for Senate coming up later today. But top of the ticket, my choice is outright fascist or a neoliberal who advocates shooting people, but just, below the waist.
Yeah, but there's still a long time between now and November. So, that the aim could go back up.
Well, yeah, it could. And this goes back to how we opened the show. People on the left don't know how to win. So the DNC at any time can replace Joe Biden with a different, better nominee who doesn't advocate shooting people.
Right. Like with, the the joke I saw just recently was, the conversation 2016. Both parties went out and found the absolute worst representative of their respective parties to run for president. And 2020 said, well, hold my beer.
Oh, man, that's the damn truth. That is the damn truth. So, all right, we are at the top of the hour. So, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you did not see the videos that we posted from Rome Bethia, who's doing his segment called Rome's Rebellion, please go check those out and take a look. Rome lives in Detroit, and he's now got a lifetime ban from Twitter because he was targeted by racists and people on the left who didn't like his commentary. So what happens is you have enough of these people report an account and Twitter just automatically bans them. So Rome, as a journalist, has certain protections under the U.S. Constitution, even in a private setting like Twitter.
Right.
So I am still working to appeal that. We'll see if that actually prevails or what's going to happen there. But he is producing videos for us. So check those out because I think he brings a unique perspective to him. And then again, we still have candidates who are running for office, many in New York and New Jersey. And then Colorado's coming up the end of June. So there are elections still happening and good progressives running in a lot of races. So please stay tuned for all of that. And as well here, we are not funded by corporations, nor are we taking, I don't know, Andy, I think I would take Exxon money and then talk about them like a dog. I'm not sure.
I think we can take Exxon money as long as you turn around and buy an electric car.
Maybe an electric police car. I don't know. So somebody chimed in, Trump is changing that law with journalists. Bullshit, he cannot. He cannot. It will never pass the Constitution. He is not an emperor. Fuck you, Trump. You cannot. So I'm not worried about that. But
well, there's a lot of things that Donald Trump says that he can't do.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not ultimately what he wants to do. It's that he's changing the narrative.
That's exactly, again,
trying to distract you.
Mm-hmm.
Look over here now. Now look over here.
Yeah, exactly. So on that note, if you want to support us, we do have a Patreon account. For as little as $3 a month, you become a patron and you get special access. We here on our network will never do a paywall like you see on corporate networks where you can't get to the information unless you pay. Because that goes against the ethic principles of journalism. So what we do ask is, if you like us, maybe drop a $3 subscription in, or we can do paypal.me/progressive insider for just a one-time contribution. So all of that pays for our software. It helps, Andy works hard on doing a lot of our video editing and things like that. It helps Rome and Brandon and all the work that we're doing here with software, equipment, and to help us expand so that we can get an impartial, progressive media, continue the work that we're doing and support others just like us. So.
And as important as we all believe that our work is here, the government does not agree with the fact that we should be getting unemployment because we're not getting paid for it. So.
That's exactly right. So,
which is kind of a sign of the times, but that can be another show.
Maybe it should be. So, all right, with that, we'll let everybody get back to their Friday and hopefully a good weekend. Stay strong, stay safe, wear your masks. Bye-bye.